Muchachos y muchachas, Bill Clinton, Chris Tucker, Kevin Spacey, Jeffrey all hop onto a plane. The infamous Boeing 727, known as the L Express, you guys know why I can't say the full name out loud, has become an icon, an infamous icon of moral decay. September of 2002, a group of dignitaries, an ex-president and celebrity elite, and Jeffrey's entourage took a trip to Africa on this private plane. You've seen some pictures, probably, but what all unfolded on this trip, nobody really knows. Or at least I don't think it's been story told much. We'll take a deep dive to understand what we can about what transpired on this trip, at least by some personal accounts of some people. With that being said, hold on to your butts, secure your wigs, stay right there. We're going to go through it. Really quick, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, preparewithnatalie.com. The unthinkable is happening. No more surprises. It's out in the open. Our so-called trusted institutions tell you not to worry, that everything's fine, but you know better. You won't allow yourself to be blindsided again. Join the folks investing in emergency food storage. You can trust My Patriot Supply, the nation's largest emergency preparedness company. Pick up their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit with breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that last up to 25 years. Just add water and heat and then eat. You guys can get it at preparewithnatalie.com. That's preparewithnatalie.com. It is September in the year 2002. A very young Shantae Davies takes a flight from Los Angeles to New York. She gets off of her commercial flight and walks over to a private plane sitting in the middle of the tarmac. She remembers a phone call she received for this trip from about a week ago. Her memory recalls Jeffrey's office asking if she would come on a trip he was hosting only a week in advance. There were no additional details given, only the date, time, and location of where to meet in New York for takeoff. She recently broke her finger and wasn't sure if she'd be fit for the trip. Her new friend, Kellen, persuaded her that this was an opportunity of a lifetime and she didn't want to miss this trip. She suggested that Shantae could do other things like prepare food or carry things within reason. Shantae agreed and made all the needed arrangements that week, such as getting the necessary shots for travel and rescheduling already established appointments. As she walked down the tarmac, she sees an employee wave her down. He ushered her over to his direction to board the private jet. As she does, she sees a familiar face. Sarah Kellen and 2 other assistants. They're waiting for Jeffrey and Kellen to show up with the mystery guests that they would be hosting. The man who originally waved her to board handed her a packet and told her to become familiar with the itinerary. He gave her and the others white uniform shirts to wear, white button-downs with captain shoulder patches. They went over the food and schedule for the duration of the trip, then sat and waited for the guests. Shantae just sat there and wondered who could be these mystery guests, who would be her trip mates. Shantae jumped out of her seat soon as she realized who the mystery guests were. A-list celebrities arrive along with former President Bill Clinton. President Clinton would make his way onto the plane, introducing himself. Shantae thought of him to be charming and sweet. More guests started to pour into the plane. Comedian Chris Tucker, movie star Kevin Spacey, Clinton's Secret Service. Shantae had to pinch herself. Was all of this real? Did her pain medicine for her broken finger make her hallucinate? As soon as everyone was introduced to each other, they all settled down with a movie. Everyone took a seat in either the giant armchairs or on the floor and eventually fell asleep. They arrived to Santa Maria Airport in Portugal to refuel the plane. President Clinton had already complained on their trip time how stiff his neck was. Kellen would encourage Shantae at the fuel stop that she would give him a massage. President Clinton then turned to Shantae and said, "Would you mind giving it a crack?" He turned his back to her and she reached up and started to rub out the kink in the former President Clinton's neck and shoulder while he was standing. Without thinking about how it sounded, she asked Clinton, "I've got a bad angle. Would you mind getting on your knees?" She didn't know what came over her. For a moment, the room felt silent, and she couldn't believe the words that shot out before realizing what she was saying and who she was saying it to. Bill Clinton's face turned as red as a tomato. He laughed along with the room and then sat down instead for her to get a better angle instead of getting on his knees. The spotlight of the trip was really on former President Bill Clinton. It was part of his organization, the Clinton Foundation's initiative to go to Africa to bring awareness to the crisis of poverty and AIDS in the continent. This was not the only trip that he took on the L Express or on Jeffrey's airplane, which is interesting. So it seems to be that the Clinton Foundation and Jeffrey's, aerial affairs did coincide at one point, at least 4 trips. On the Ghana leg of the trip, 𝘱𝘳 revealed that she went shopping at a small wooden jewelry store and helped the former president pick out a bracelet for his daughter Chelsea. She said, "He and I were bonding over the fact that my great uncle Russell Cronkite was the head chef for the Blair House, the guest house of the White House during his presidency. He was the chef that made Chelsea's infamous pizzas for her 13th birthday."
We miss John Witherspoon in a way that can't really be quantified, if I'm being honest with you. And the Chris Tucker that we got now is Epstein Island Chris Tucker, not Smokey.
Oh, Lord.
You knew Jeffrey Epstein, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. We flew Bill Clinton and a lot of different, that was a humanitarian trip to Africa. And I met him on that trip because it was his plane. I didn't know who plane we was getting on, but it was a whole bunch of dignitary people. We was with a delegation. And yeah, I met him, and you don't know people, what they do in their private lives. So yeah.
But tell me this, Chris. You was on this private plane, and you could tell that it was a private plane because they called it, what is Lolita Express?
Oh yeah, it was a private plane. Yes. Oh yes.
But wait a minute. You didn't never go to that island, did you?
No. I don't know where that thing at.
It seemed to be that Chris Tucker was actually on his multiplied trip that year. Chris Tucker visited 2 times previous that year, the first time with Treasury Secretary Paul O'Neill and later with Secretary Colin Powell. Chris Tucker said that he needed to visit the continent again to learn more about it. According to the Intelligencer, they quoted him saying, "In every country I go to, I just find myself falling more in love with Africa. I just had to come and see what more I can do to help." It also says that in the, now infamous trip to Africa with Clinton and Jeffrey, that Tucker was watching Clinton closely in preparation for his starring role in Head of State, a movie about America's first Black head of state, president. There, sitting in the U.S. archives, I found this very interesting press briefing with Chris Tucker and then Secretary Colin Powell. So the briefing starts with obvious items that Secretary Powell had to address, such as geopolitical and diplomatic issues of that time. And then it transpired into questions with Chris Tucker, ending and capping the press briefing. This is what it said. So the question out to Chris Tucker was, "I wanted to know what particularly made you want to get involved with Africa? And would you like to be in a movie with Secretary Powell?" Mr. Tucker, or Chris Tucker, says, "Well, I'm doing this movie playing the President of the United States, and the name of it is Mr. President." Now, later on, I think they changed the name of this movie to Head of State because I searched for Mr. President. I couldn't find it. So I think it's called Head of State. I've been doing a lot of research. I've been fortunate enough to meet with the Secretary of State, and also I've traveled to Africa several times to promote movies. I fell in love with the continent. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time there to meet people. I went on a trip with the Treasury Secretary to Africa. I learned a lot on that trip. So I have a lot of history of Africa. So I'm really excited to go to this conference to learn even more about it. To answer your second question, I would love to do a movie with the secretary. I'm basing a lot of my character on the secretary, so I want to make sure that I represent the office right. Thank you. Another question out to Chris Tucker was, will you accompany the president to Africa sometime next year? And then Chris Tucker responded, I hope so, but it's not confirmed yet, but I hope so. And then there's an inaudible question, as you guys can see, and this is straight from the U.S. Archives. And then Chris Tucker responds, well, I think that for the Secretary of State to come to the conference is a very, very big thing. And I think that something good is going to come out of it. I hope so. I'm just looking forward to seeing what solutions can be done to help some of the problems around the continent. So what's interesting about this press briefing is that this was actually asked of them September 3rd, 2002, which was the same year that Jeffrey and Bill Clinton took their trip to Africa just days after that. If we visit the flight manifests, you guys can see it for yourself here, that in September 20, I believe this is September 21st, you guys see where they take this trip to Africa. And actually this lines up with the testimony of 𝘱𝘭𝑚 Davies, who is the former masseuse for Jeffrey. And the first stop that they make was from JFK, which would be in New York. And then they would make their way to Santa Maria Airport, which is coded LPAZ, as you guys can see there. And so that is where the first stop was. And that's where the infamous picture of 𝘱𝘭𝑚 Davies massaging former President Bill Clinton took place, right? Now, once again, I just want to remind you guys of what 𝘱𝘭𝑚's first observations and impressions were of Bill Clinton, which surprisingly is that she thought he was sweet and gentle, like he was a gentleman. I don't know. You guys can make your own assessments, but that's straight from her testimony. And so from there, you guys can see that the flight kind of transcends from Portugal to Ghana to Nigeria to Rwanda, Mozambique, South Africa, and then later on, they make their way over to London and then France. But here is the manifest here, just so you guys can pause this video if you want to overview it. But I think it's really interesting because there are some other guests other than Chris Tucker and Kevin Spacey that did accompany them on this trip. Okay, as far as any other previous relationship or post-relationship with Bill Clinton and Chris Tucker, it does seem to be that Chris Tucker has been very involved with fundraising for, Democratic initiatives, Democratic fundraising. He has been involved or photographed, at least, I believe, after 2002. I think this was like 2006. With Chris Tucker attending the Clinton Global Initiative. And so it seems to be that Chris Tucker has just been, he has been friends with Bill Clinton. Who knows? I am not going to make any allegations. I don't know enough or have evidence to suggest that Chris Tucker did anything on this trip. So again, this is just here to just show you what exists, what has happened, what relationships are established, what is said to have happened on this trip. I'm just letting you guys know. Now, Kevin Spacey is no stranger to Bill Clinton. It seems to be that they've had a previous relationship, a very strong friendship before. He's been photographed by the paparazzi, coming from dinners and press briefings and events thrown by Bill Clinton. I mean, various events, right? So it seems to be that he has had a very strong friendship relationship with Bill Clinton prior to this trip and after this trip. He was quoted by saying for this particular 2002 Africa trip, HIV/AIDS is the single most important issue facing the world today. If we don't begin to tackle this one, then it doesn't much matter what else we try to do, because we are going to be faced with a devastating plague that would wipe out generations. Now, Ron Burkle is a deep-pocketed billionaire who obviously has to rub elbows with a lot of people, as many billionaires will do. But I think this guy in particular is interesting because he was good buddies with Bill Clinton, with this guy named Steve Bing, who recently passed, away, I think in the recent years. And I just find that whole dynamic really, just really interesting. Now, Ron Burkle himself has a whole other thing that we can explore. I've actually explored quite a bit when I did my dig on Lincoln Park and Chester with, what philanthropic things he was, basically into. And, Ron Burkle actually invested a lot with the Music for Relief Fund and all these things. Anyway, that's a whole other tangent, but I just wanted to kind of cover that there were some other interesting guests on this whole trip. Hey, it's editing me here, and there were just a couple people that I forgot to record, and I definitely feel like they need to be mentioned as they did join this entourage on the trip. So the first one I'm going to mention is Sarah Kellen. Now, Sarah Kellen has claimed victimhood in the whole Jeffrey Glenn saga. However, in 2007, a police affidavit filed with Palm Beach alleged that she coordinated, now I'm just quoting here, and I'm going to change some words up. You guys know the whole thing. She coordinated and aided the recruitment of, people under the age of 18. I'm just going to say it that way, to frequent Jeffrey's house so that certain services, emphasis on the certain services, were performed and provided to Jeffrey. The schedule mentioned that the people under the age of 18 to return to the work for Jeffrey secured their appointments for the purpose of what activity and lewd acts, and arranged the certain rooms for said people under 18. In other words, children. So another person that was on this Africa trip, I am personally surprised does not get mentioned at all a lot within any conversation about Jeffrey and Glenn and their saga and the whole thing of what they did. She is connected to Clinton and Obama. Her name is Gail Smith. Now, Gail Smith from 1998 to 2001 was a special assistant to President Bill Clinton and senior director for American affairs at the U.S. National Security Council. Now, that's 1998 to 2001. This trip happened in 2002. Just take note of that. In 2009, Smith joined the U.S. National Security Council, where she was a special assistant to President Obama and senior director for development and democracy, where her focus was on global development and humanitarian assistance. On April 30th, 2015, President Obama announced his nomination of Smith to be the new administrator for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID for short, to succeed Dr. Rajiv Shah, who resigned the post February 2015. Despite some opposition to her appointment and delayed Senate confirmation, Smith was confirmed on November 30th, 2015. Now, it is rumored that Gail Smith is a form of confidant for the Clintons. That I cannot confirm or deny, but just know that that is what's being said about this lady. Now, again, when we're talking about, diplomats and politicians, dignitaries, I'm just really surprised that these sort of associates don't come up more often. But now you know. Now I'm just going to take a wild guess, and this is just my pure speculation here, but I think that this is an actual picture of Bill Clinton with Shantae Davies in the background, as she describes that she was helping him pick out a piece of jewelry. And the reason why I think that that's her, of course, we don't know that for sure, is I think that those are the same pants that she was photographed with in another picture. And I think her hair kind of matches that. So I don't know. It could just be a different person, but I'm just going to take a wild guess that that is actually her, and that is the scene that she describes. So anyway, I hope that this was at least somewhat informative about the trip. I don't know. We see these pictures kind of floating around on social media. We hear, these accounts being given of these trips and these incidents and events and this horrific, saga of Jeffrey and Ghislaine. But I think that we don't really do a good job of slowing down and to understand the full context, or at least what context is available out there to describe these types of things and events and trips and things like that. But I think nonetheless it is important. So I was interested in it, and I think that whenever I have interest in something, you guys will also find interest in it as well. So guys, let me know what you think about this trip to Africa. I definitely painted a lot more illustrative context to this trip. Do you think that every single person was guilty on this trip? For instance, Chris Tucker. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will definitely be back with more videos like this year because I've made an entire list. So if you are not subscribed, be sure to do that right now. Anyway, with that being said, guys, thank you so much for your love. I will catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.